Terry Jones's professional life in television really started when he turned down a job offer at Anglia Television to accept a position at the BBC.
So I was right there on the inside track, really, and I knew and I had an office and 2 typewriters and 4 telephones, which was rather confusing, and in the BBC in the TV centre, and on the 4th floor, and there were other writers. There was John Law was there. He was writing the HUD shows, but he was a kind of resident comedy writer. This is when the BBC was full of creative people. They had writers on staff, and they had comedy writers. There was Richard Waring in the next office. He was writing marriage lines with a bottle of whiskey under the table. And Robert Gray was in the next office, who used to write Pinky and Perky. And I'd sit there in these 4 offices. There's the light entertainment script department. And I did a lot of script reading and vetting of scripts and tried to write the odd things and started contributing a few odd jokes, like to... the first one was the one for Ken Dodd, who was very big then. And I'd written these jokes for Ken Dodd, but I had to go and show them to him. I had to go up to an office on the 6th floor or something. So I'd had this thing about the police sports. And so we took over Wembley Stadium. We had all these policemen in uniform doing sports. And then that went in. We didn't get any. I didn't get any credit for it. Yeah. Well, no, you're BBC staff. And then they used it in the review of the year. They said it was Ken Dodd's year. He was his most favourite. And they used that clip. That's my joke.
Here's John Cleese.
2 of the sketches that I wrote that were in the 61 Footlights Review were done on, that was the week that was, because David Frost knew about them.
Yeah.
And he got me jolly good payments too. I mean, he got me something like £30, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. Because remember, I taught for £5 a week. Yeah. To get £30 for a sketch, I mean, unbelievable. And they did it by inflating the length of the sketches, which was very nice, and pretending I'd written a 5-minute sketch when it was really 3 minutes. It was 5. You got £6 a minute.
John Cleese also turned down a job offer, this time as a lawyer, to take a job at the BBC.
Yeah, well, you see, at that stage I was just writing sketches and also writing links for a magazine programme. But perfectly happy, getting paid £30 a week, I think it was, and enjoying writing scripts for Dick Emery. And then I was doing these little links for the radio and having a great time, not least because I was pretty relaxed, happy to be in London, and of course had more money than I ever thought was conceivable at £30 a week. So I was able to go and have curries whenever I wanted to, and go to the Baker Street Classic Cinema and see all the Marx Brothers movies. It was a good time.
After leaving Cambridge, Eric Idle got work in repertory theatre in Leicester. At the same time, he was writing for the radio show I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again at the BBC.
I came down, I had no idea what I was going to do, and the first thing is I went into rep in Leicester. Richard Eyre directed Oh, What a Lovely War. Yeah. So I went off to Leicester and did that, then we did one for the parts, and then I realised I could never be an actor. And I started to write for I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again, sending them scripts.
Right.
And then Frosty, the Barnacles of Frosty, came and picked us up from there. And then they kept me on at Leicester Rep for One for the Pot, a dreadful sort of farce, which I hated. And I was so bad at it that I would spend my time backstage writing. And I was there writing a sketch one day, and there was this sort of pause, and then this guy standing behind me saying, "Hello, Eric. Going well, is it?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you mind joining me on stage?" There was complete silence in the theatre. I was off. And I realised at that point my future was probably more in writing than acting.
Across the seas, Terry Gilliam was plotting his own course, and it didn't involve the BBC.
And then I didn't really know what I was going to do. It was only after graduating, with not a clue, everybody else was going off somewhere. I didn't have a clue where I was going. Then I was counselling at the summer camp, because I'd given up summer work properly. I quit working in the Chevrolet assembly plant on the assembly line. It was my night. I was working at nights. I'm never going to work for money again in my life. And I quit and got a job in a children's theatre where I made sets and painted myself green and played the ogre. I was reading Moss Hart's autobiography, and it was called Act One. And Moss Hart, little barefoot boy with cheek, coming down to New York and sort of meeting up with George Kaufman, and then suddenly Kaufman and Hart, and writing all these great plays. And I got all inspired. Got to go to New York. And I wrote Harvey, coming to New York, and he wrote me a letter saying, "Don't bother, there's nothing here for you, kid. Stay away." And I said, "No, I'm off to New York." And I just went to New York. I didn't have any plans other than I wanted to meet Harvey and go to New York. And so I went to New York and met Harvey. And I went and met him in the Algonquin Hotel. This is great, especially after reading Moss Hart, the Algonquin Round Table. And he'd taken a suite upstairs and stuffed all his cartoonists in there, and they were working on this thing. And I went in there, and the door opens, and there are all my heroes in this room drawing. It's fantastic. And Harvey turns up a bit later, and it turns out that Chuck Alverson, who I wrote Jabberwocky with, who was then the assistant editor on the magazine, was quitting, and they were looking for somebody to take his job. And I walked right into it.
It's just perfect timing, right?
Yeah, I mean, you sit there. This isn't supposed to happen like this, but it happened to Moss Hart. And it happened to me just like that. I thought it's very weird because it's almost like you're willing something to happen because I've read the story. I know this can happen. And I'm going to go. But I mean, the luck involved in this stuff is just crazed, And so then for 3 years in New York, Harvey and I did the magazine. It was the two of us.
John Cleese separated from the BBC, well, somebody had to, and together with Graham Chapman and Humphrey Barclay, they went on tour to New Zealand and then America with the show Cambridge Circus.
Suddenly somebody starts saying, well, hey guys, what about coming to New Zealand and probably going on to Broadway? And of course at that age, I don't think anyone was married or thinking about getting married. You kind of think, why not? Sounds a lot of fun.
A bad review in the New York Times meant Cambridge Circus closed after only 3 weeks. It may have been coughing up blood, but it wasn't dead yet.
Somebody told me that the producers were after a tax loss, but we never knew. And then a couple of nice guys who owned a place down on Washington Square asked us if we wanted to come and do it in a supper club, and I loved it there. And we did it there for some months, and then we put together a second review. And it was during the time we were doing the second review. 1 or 2 people left. Graham left because he felt he should get on with his medicine. I think Humphrey departed after he'd directed the show. And I think David Hatch may have gone a little early. It'd be very easy to check. One night, Tommy Steele was in the audience. And the next thing I knew, I was invited to audition for Half a Sixpence. When they gave that to me, to my astonishment, I went into a quite new routine of, to do with the musical shows. And when I came out of that, I had a brief stint with Newsweek, where I failed to make the grade, and realized that they were going to let me go. And as I liked the main editor, I wrote a resignation letter so he didn't have to do it. And almost immediately was catapulted through a friend into a show that was going to Chicago and Washington. That was the show from the establishment.